I'm Nick Westergaard, and this is On Brand, helping you tell your story. My guest this week is Matt Johnson.
I think so much more of branding now is really a relationship, especially with the rise of social media and just increased democratization of access, and the ability to kind of have a one-to-one relationship with the brand has grown over time. It really is less about what the brand is saying and pushing out to consumers and more about the relationship they share, in some cases with individuals.
Throughout his career, Matt Johnson has helped build iconic brands for big names like Adidas, The Truth Initiative, Powerade, King's Hawaiian, 23andMe, Miller Coors, ESPN, Instagram, and Microsoft. Currently serving as co-founder and chief strategy officer of creative agency HAYMAKER, his strategic insight helped the agency win 2 Ad Age Small Agency of the Year awards, The Truth Initiative win for the most effective brand in North America, and Adidas to be named Ad Age's A-List Marketer of the Year. When Matt isn't making memorable ad campaigns, Matt also lends his voice as a voice actor for over 20 years, voicing countless commercials and starring in 2 critically acclaimed HBO animated series, 10-Year-Old Tom and The Life and Times of Tim. My interview with Matt Johnson is coming right up. But first...
As a person with a very deep voice, I'm hired all the time for advertising campaigns. But a deep voice doesn't sell B2B, and advertising on the wrong platform doesn't sell B2B either. That's why if you're a B2B marketer, you should use LinkedIn ads. LinkedIn has the targeting capabilities to help you reach the world's largest professional audience. That's right, over 70 million decision makers all in one place. All the big wigs, then medium wigs, also small wigs who are on the path to becoming big wigs. Okay, that's enough about wigs. LinkedIn ads allows you to focus on getting your B2B message to the right people. So, does that mean you should use ads on LinkedIn instead of hiring me, the man with the deepest voice in the world? Yes. Yes, it does. Get started today and see why LinkedIn is the place to be. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next campaign. Go to linkedin.com/MPN to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/MPN. Terms and conditions apply.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? T. Adeola hosts a great podcast called Tiny Giants. T, tell us what these fine folks will get out of listening.
We are the creator economy show that's about careers, not celebrity. Right? So who should listen to this show are the parents of young people who want to know more about the creator economy and why that's a career path for their children, or the young people themselves.
Amazing. Where can the young people or the parents subscribe?
You can find us at tinygiants.tech or wherever you get these podcasts, these fine podcasts. And you can also find us at the Marketing Podcast Network, which is marketingpodcast.net.
You heard him. Go subscribe.
Matt Johnson, welcome to On Brand.
Thanks for having me.
I am thrilled to be chatting with you and looking forward to learning more about your work. But first, I have to ask about the agency name HAYMAKER. I love creative agency names because there's usually a story behind them.
Yes, there is. My co-founder, Jay Kamath, and I, we met at 72 and Sunny in Los Angeles. And when we started talking about forming the agency, we had, of course, a whole list of names, but both of us are pretty big sports fans. So we worked on ESPN together at 72. That's where we met. And as we were running through names, Jay threw out HAYMAKER, which is a boxing term. And immediately we started riffing on what it could mean as an agency. It's a bit of an unconventional punch that's, thrown kind of wildly. But when it lands, it typically gets the job done and knocks out the opponent. So we thought that was a really cool name. And as we started to explore what it could mean for us, our partnership's a bit unconventional. I'm a strategist by trade and he's a creative, but yet we work as a team. And that's really how we have the agency built. It's kind of modeled after our relationship where we partner strategic thinkers with creative thinkers on both the strategy as well as the creative work.
Oh, there we go. There's that story. And I love the idea of throwing a haymaker because it seems like something that is especially fitting for the noisy world that we find ourselves in as brands working to stand out. Now, as this airs, we're maybe a month out here from the Super Bowl.
Mhm.
Talk about, at the risk of overextending the metaphor, talk about what kind of a haymaker you need to throw to land in that big space with all of that noise and Taylor Swift.
Yeah, huge stage. And this year, especially, so many more additional eyeballs thanks to Taylor and Travis's relationship, which is, again, even more fun. It's the second Super Bowl spot that we've completed as Haymaker. I'd worked on a few in my previous career, but each of them presents a different challenge. One, just because of the culture that you're trying to communicate within, right? What's happened that year? Obviously, I think in the year that we did our first, it was kind of the Bitcoin year. There was a lot of Bitcoin ads. Coinbase dropped their big QR code ad, and this year it felt like, from our perspective, it was about concept. And again, there was a lot of celebrities. I think in hindsight, it was. I think we were one of the few spots that didn't have celebrity talent in it, which is, a bit unconventional, I would say, especially it kind of turned out that way once you looked back at all of the different ads. But for us, it was, let's land a big concept as opposed to just having big names and faces in the ad. And Pluto TV turned out to be an incredible partner, really brave, and with us in lockstep, not only, as a client, but truly as a partner on the creative side through every step of development. And it was for as the most stressful ad that you can make in the business, it was a really enjoyable experience this year. So pretty thankful for that. Yeah.
That's good positioning there of
Yeah.
the of the work that is of the work that is a Super Bowl ad. So that's fascinating. So you've worked with many kind of iconic brands, from Adidas to King's Hawaiian to Microsoft. As brands continue to stay relevant, how does that impact what we say and how we say it in some of those iconic cases?
I think the term brand and what branding means has evolved so much over time. I started in 1997, fresh out of college, and I studied it at the University of Oregon, advertising. It is nothing like it was when I, was a young pup coming out of school. I think so much more of branding now is really a relationship, and especially with the rise of social media and just increased democratization of access and the ability to kind of have a one-to-one relationship with the brand has grown over time. It really is less about just a pure look or what the brand is saying and pushing out to consumers, and more about the relationship that they share in some cases with individuals. And so really that's where I tend to start, is what is the relationship that I'm looking to form and help form with a brand and their partner and with their audience. And more, there needs to be some sort of value exchange. What is the consumer getting out of this relationship beyond the product itself or the service itself? So those things are kind of the tent poles, I would say, that I try to explore when thinking about strategically positioning a brand, really of any size. That's what I mean by democratization. It's the biggest brands on the block to the smallest challengers are kind of playing in the same arena. One might have a bit more money, but for the most part, they're still up against the same challenges.
That's such a good point. That last one on playing in the same park. And I also think I'm a sucker for good definitions, and you walking us through and using concepts like relationships, democratization. And I was just talking with a student actually here at the University of Iowa, where I teach, about our our labels in
Mhm.
in branding, marketing, advertising, and these labels have not and the student, a younger person, cringed a bit at those labels. And I have, long said that there has been a change in meaning because what goes with them doesn't really work. And I think you see that with branding, with marketing, with
Mhm.
advertising. It's a party doing something to someone else. And I think that when you talk about relationships, that really recategorizes it in an important way, because it's important to understand you're not just doing something to an unsuspecting public. You are building a relationship with another party. And I would guess that you have to really know who that relationship is with as a point of like table stakes here.
Oh, absolutely. I would say first, the student that you're referring to, they have a lot to cringe about. There's a lot of bad work that's out there. And again, not necessarily intentionally bad, but I think people sometimes miss that opportunity. I don't see it as a necessity. I see it as an opportunity. You have an opportunity to win the relationship with those people. But it does take some unconventional thought and definitely some unconventional action. But and then for iconic brands, especially brands that have been around, you have to also consider that there's a whole different group of people that have a different relationship with that brand. So, for example, Adidas, there's the folks that have been with them since the 70s, right? And then you've got young people today that are meeting the brand for the first time. So you really have to make sure that you're being laser focused with your communications, specifically on the audience. And then again, what type of relationship do you want to try to build with them? And try is the key. It's not a guarantee and it shouldn't be assumed. You have to earn it, even if you're the biggest brand on the block. So I think unconventional approaches that drip with authenticity are seemingly the most effective in the market. You have to be authentic about who you are, what your foundations are as a brand. If you're a new brand, what foundations are you communicating, and what are you learning from the consumer? That doesn't always come in the form of testing. It's sometimes just being observant. Like, what is culture telling you? What's product reaction telling you? What's consumer feedback telling you? And then using those data points and information to really, again, crack that relationship and try to be as human as possible. I think when brands come off as brand, it especially in today's landscape, it's less effective. I think the more human they can be, the better.
Can I tell you that I'm still distracted by not only mispronouncing Adidas
All good. Yeah.
to a brand builder, but also a voiceover actor. So I kind of feel like I have committed a crime times two. So
Not at all. I say Adidas because if anyone from my experience there, I've been really lucky. I've been able to work on that brand, I believe 3 separate times in my career. And the folks up in Portland or over in Germany would probably appreciate that I called it Adidas. But most people call it Adidas. It's all good. Either way works.
You are on brand regardless. and coming back to that point of knowing your people. On Brand will be right back after this.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? T. Adeola hosts a great podcast called Tiny Giants. T, tell us what these fine folks will get out of listening.
We are the creator economy show that's about careers, not celebrity. Right? So who should listen to this show are the parents of young people who want to know more about the creator economy and why that's a career path for their children, or the young people themselves.
Amazing. Where can the young people or the parents subscribe?
You can find us at tinygiants.tech or wherever you get these podcasts, these fine podcasts. And you can also find us at the Marketing Podcast Network, which is marketingpodcast.net.
You heard him. Go subscribe. You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Danielle Wiley hosts a great podcast called The Art of Sway. Danielle, tell us what you talk about on the show.
The Art of Sway brings listeners inside the world of marketing as seen through the lens of influence. So each week I chat with an expert guest for a lively discussion about connecting ideas with audiences in an attempt to uncover all the ways influence impacts how and what we discover, purchase, and recommend to each other.
Wow. And where can people subscribe?
Go to theartofswaypodcast.com, find the show at marketingpodcasts.net, or search for The Art of Sway wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard her. Go subscribe.
Now, back to the show. So you were talking about being unconventional, being authentic. And I think that those two things would be at the top of any brand builder's list today. But those are things we talk about a lot, and they're hard to do. They're at the top of a list, but at the same time, not an easy thing to check off of a list. So can we tackle each of those when it comes to being unconventional? Is there a process? Is there a path? Is there a question that we should consider so that we're being unconventional in a way that makes sense for our brand, but not in a way that is just unconventional for the sake of being unconventional?
Sure. I think at the top there are different questions. Let's just say that we're starting at the brief moment. You might get a brief that says we need 2 TVCs, we need an out-of-home element, and we need social assets. And that's a moment or an opportunity to pause and ask, what's the problem that we're trying to solve? Again, there are business realities. You need to be out in market. They are called ads after all. But the solution to the problem might yield a different output than just filling the media plan. Of course, you could fill the media plan and do something that's a little less conventional in order to kind of, again, get at that specific problem. So that's kind of one moment where you're not questioning the plan. Obviously, a lot of intelligence and insight goes into that. What you're doing is you're looking for an additional opportunity that might be outside of a traditional plan that could lend itself to a solution. The next thing I would say is you need to look at kind of not only what's been done, but what stories are being told and how are people building relationships with brands. And I think you see that that's almost where you can see what I would call like trends throughout the ad game. So we were on a trend for a while where there was a lot of purpose-led work, right? Where people were leaning into brands' activities apart from what they did to sell product. I think one that I was really encouraged to see emerge more throughout the Super Bowl especially was more humor. I think we as a nation might be ready to get back to laughing a little bit more and having a bit more entertainment from our brands. I think the brands that have been confident enough to provide that, even it can be really, really entertaining, like something like, for me, I find a lot of what YETI does to be really entertaining. It's not necessarily comical, but it's really, it scratches the itch if you have any interest or thirst for the outdoors. But there's a lot of funny work that was done on the Super Bowl, which again, I know it's a stage that tends to lend itself to that, but you're seeing more and more comedy come out in just your everyday ads, which I think is good for all of us. That's what's kind of the most fun. But those are two areas. You can either approach it from the brief, what's the best way to solve the problem, or look at the trends that are happening within communication and like, how can we do something that's maybe a little bit different than what's currently on trend.
Well, and you made a really good point there about YETI too. And I think sometimes like we talk about humor and we get a little one-dimensional with it. And we kind of think we need to get real jokey real fast. And a lot of times we end up real cringy real fast. And the differentiation of being entertaining, that is on that same spectrum and has value and audience engagement and connection, and so many of the things that we would tag as being valuable about humor, but it's almost it's coming at it from a different angle in the approach.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm a big fan of clever work. I love really silly slapstick work as well, but I think YETI is really sharp. And I'm going to butcher this. They had a line about AI. I can't remember exactly what it was, but they also had a campaign that was a bit more around just how long the products last that I thought was really sharp. Every single use or generations to break in those, there were a couple different executions in At a Home, single line, really clever. I've been throughout my career, probably I would say like one of the luckiest people in advertising. I've just been able to be in a lot of rooms where people a lot smarter than me have kind of shared their perspectives and their opinions. There was one, again, moment I remember, it might have even been in like passing in a hallway. I don't remember the specific moment, but Rich Silverstein once said that when you create ads, it's like a connect the dots picture. You kind of have to leave a few of the dots for the consumer to connect, and their participation in it is what really makes it either clever, smart, funny. That to me is just like stuck with me like brain cement over the years. And so when I see really clever Out of Home or clever television, I think of that. And that's something that I try to aim for when looking, reviewing, or developing work, at Haymaker. Are we inviting the consumer in on the process of actually processing the ads, or are we just speaking at them? The former is what I try to aim for.
Well, and I think that's such an important point, and I love that analogy too, of leaving some of the dots to connect. I mean, it makes me think, back to where that analogy, it's like a connect the dot activity in an activity book. It's meant for the participant to be a part of. So I think that that's an important step, and it's easy in being comprehensive to go ahead and connect all of those dots, but there's value in, as you said, leaving room for the audience to be a part of that process as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a tricky thing. I think, especially, you mentioned the crowded landscape when we first started talking.
Yeah.
We call that just Jay and I talk about fragmentation a lot when we talk about our sharing ideas with partners. There are so many bets that you can make as a marketer today. A lot of folks will take the approach. It's almost like playing roulette. They're playing really, really small bets on a bunch of different numbers, hoping that one of them hits. And sometimes they do. And you can't deny that thing when the ball lands on your number. It's pretty special. But the thing that is missing from that approach, that equation, is again one of the fundamental elements of branding, which is the long-term residual impact of your communications or strategy, right? So each touch point, each message, each value exchange that you have with the consumer is going to leave an impression with them. And if you're hyper fragmented as a brand and you don't really have a clear strategy of like, well, which of these bets, what are each of these bets doing for us in the long run or at a larger vision, you'll actually do more to confuse consumers than you will to be really, really clear, sharp, and laser focused with them. There are some brands that are really disciplined about this, and other brands that, again, I think it's not as if they're making mistakes. A lot of them are just finding their feet. But I think the brands that seem to do the best have a really sharp focus on how every bet they place or every move that they make is paying off to a larger brand ideal or brand position.
That is such a great point. And as we start to wrap up, I love when we have people with interesting backgrounds, because I think that, we've talked about, students and studying, but I think that, um, I think that there's interesting backgrounds that make their way into the brand building work. So I have to ask about you being a voice actor.
Mhm.
As a recovering theater arts major myself. Were you an actor before being a brand builder, or did it happen as a result of being a brand builder, or what's the chicken and the egg of voice acting and brand building?
I had, again, I really do consider myself to be very lucky. I came out of school. I stumbled into advertising at Oregon. I fell in love with it. And I was it took 6 months to get a job, but I landed at Goodby. And that place has left an indelible impression on me in so many ways. I was introduced to improv comedy. I was introduced to stand-up comedy. I was introduced to, I learned how to play the guitar, snowboard, and skateboard when I was there. And we had these castings that would happen. We used to create what's called an idea video. We would make a RIP video that was to communicate a singular idea or the campaign idea in typically pitch or, campaign launch scenarios with clients. Inevitably, those things come down to the wire, and they're not, at the time, they weren't really casting, quote unquote, real actors to read the voiceover. It would be an internal casting. And I tried one and got it. And then if you just think about the talent that's come out of there, I basically had the top creative talent, at the time, arguably in the world, coaching me on how to read voiceover. So I have a pretty good ear, and I just kind of got used to doing it, again, under the tutelage of some of the best. And then this lovely woman named Cindy Fluitt, she was a producer, the head of production there, said, "Hey, you can actually join the union and make money doing this." And I was like, "What union? And what do you mean make money?" And she said, "The Screen Actors Guild." And she said, "Why don't we take a bunch of your reads that you've done here at the agency, we'll put them on," this is going to make me feel really old, but a 1/2-inch tape, which is a VHS tape, "and we'll send it to an agent that I know here in San Francisco." And we did that. And then I just started to work kind of booking radio and television commercials, and the folks at Goodby were really good. And I moved to Los Angeles. I had left Goodby, worked at a different agency, moved down to Los Angeles, and was freelancing as a strategist and was doing voiceover work. And a former colleague of mine that, I did funny voices for what we do, holiday videos at the end of the year it could be. And, you go out and you sing karaoke, or you're with friends and you do impressions of people. And this guy, Steve Dildarian, who created some of the most iconic advertising ever. He's one of the creators of the Budweiser Lizards, to name a few, basically made a cartoon. And he said, "I need some voices to go and basically pitch this." And so I tried a couple characters for him, and one of them stuck. And then I had to audition for the network, and I booked the audition through the network and passed all of the tests. And then it just kind of continued from there. And I've done video games and other animation pieces and a lot of commercials. And it's been one of the biggest joys and creative outlets in my life. And it's really fun to share with my kids. They get a kick out of it. It's fun. I really enjoy it. And again, it's all born from what I would say was a really cool creative environment where I was exposed to I look back on it and it's ridiculous, the amount of creativity that I walked into in 1997 on California Street in San Francisco. It really shaped my life and inspired me in many ways.
Awesome. Well, that story made me smile, and it is my turn to get to ask you for a brand that has made you smile recently.
Yeah, I don't want to go too hard at YETI, but it's definitely up there. The other one I would say that, again, and they're another independent agency that Eric Kalman runs. And I've never met the man. We're friends on LinkedIn, but I thought that his Reese's work in the Super Bowl was really funny. Again, maybe we'll get to see each other at the Small Agency Awards, but I think that kind of work, it's really silly but super refreshing. I just love, and it's one of the reasons I got into advertising. And so his work that they did, he and his agency did for Reese's, I thought was really funny. I'm not going to say any of our work, but again, I would if that were acceptable. But yeah, if I had to look across the industry, that was one that really made me laugh.
Well, it would be acceptable, and it would also be a good segue, because my very next question in wrapping up is, where can folks go to learn more about who you are and what you do?
Oh, yeah. Most of our work is up on our website. It's HYMKR.co. And we've done not only work for Pluto, which we'll be putting up soon, a lot of great work for Greenlight Financial, Topo Chico. We're about to launch some work for Pair of Thieves, which I'm really excited about. It's an underwear brand that you can find in Walmart and Target. There's so many more. We've been really lucky in our 7 years at HAYMAKER to work with such brave, I would say, and trusting partners over the years. The last, since the pandemic, it's been kind of a wild time in the industry. I'm sure many people would tell you that. But again, we've been really fortunate with all of the brand partners that we've had kind of walk through the door. And, when you're an upstart independent agency, it takes a pretty big leap of faith for people to take a chance on you, especially a lot of those early clients like Truth and King's Hawaiian and all of the folks at VF. It was Reef and Eagle Creek and Jansport. I think 23andMe and Lionsgate, the list goes on and on and on. And the folks at Coca-Cola have been really good to us as well. I mean, I think that when I have moments to talk about the work that we've done or the career that I've been fortunate to have, I do really feel like one of the luckiest guys in advertising.
I love it. Well, we will link up to all of that in our show notes, which folks can find at onbrandpodcast.com. Matt Johnson, thanks for being on brand with us.
Nick, thank you so much. This was fun.
On Brand is part of the Marketing Podcast Network. If you like what you're hearing, if we've made you smile, you can always listen free on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or whatever your favorite platform may be. And please take a moment and rate and review the podcast to help others find the show. Until next week, I'm Nick Westergaard, and I'll see you on the internet.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? T. Adeola hosts a great podcast called Tiny Giants. T, tell us what these fine folks will get out of listening.
We are the creator economy show that's about careers, not celebrity. Right? So who should listen to this show are the parents of young people who want to know more about the creator economy and why that's a career path for their children, or the young people themselves.
Amazing. Where can the young people or the parents subscribe?
You can find us at tinygiants.tech or wherever you get these podcasts, these fine podcasts. And you can also find us at the Marketing Podcast Network, which is marketingpodcast.net.
You heard him. Go subscribe.
This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.